Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Monday. And as you can see, it's a little dark. It's 5:30 a.m. So who knows? While I'm out, we might see the sunrise, which will be kind of cool. But you know what? I'm awake. Time to start my day and have a good day. So yeah. Let's see here. We had a weekend of streaming the new set, KO Coliseum. It was a very weird weekend because Saturday's stream was one of the best streams I've had in a long time. Playing ranked on main, doing really well, doing well with a variety of things, and actually accelerating all the way up to like essentially master's level, top 1%, which is usually where I sit pretty comfortably without trying too hard. But then Sunday was like bashing my head into a brick wall over and over and over, which was definitely a unique experience. And, I'm being funny and tilty. Like, some of it is genuine tilt for sure. Some of it is cranking it up to the max because I'm there to be entertaining because it's a stream, But it's always nice to look on moments like that and reflect on it, right? It's like, it's easy to jump to, well, it's the meta's fault or it's the game's fault or, things like that. But it's like really stopping and looking at like, okay, how much of this was just bad play? And how much of this is like something that's a challenge with the meta or a challenge with a game mechanic or what's going on, really digging deep into like some challenging things. And this is where like, even during development, it can be really hard to isolate these tough things to find that are like actually going to create problem states. And for me, this is, the team's been doing a great job. I think one of the surprising challenges, and it all culminated last night. I posted that clip on Twitter where I was playing Luden's Callista, and I was doing really, really well and clearing boards with it, which is hilarious. But I want to tell you that I proceeded to go fourth that game. And starting at about 5-4, I could not win a single fight. And the challenge was that Callista, who shoots a bolt that does, 5,000 damage, giant single target spell, kept hitting Edge of Knights and Kazantes. And, it's not just Callista. There's a lot of spells in the game right now that are like, I'm going to hit somebody pretty hard. And so, there's things like that I don't know that, anyone could have really predicted would have been the biggest thing to overcome, was going to be, everyone was going to be building Edge of Knights, and what that would do to spell shapes. Because I will say for me personally, it feels a lot like Oxforce. The other one, by the way, is Luchador. Luchador has a similar effect. And so between various Luchadors, Edge of Knights, and Casantes, it feels like none of your spells can have quite the impact you want them to. And so only champions that do pretty sustained damage are finding success. But, there are things, the team will keep working on it. This week they're going to be working on it. I'm at the leadership offsite. My flight is today at 2:00. I'm sure they will make some changes. Now, if you really want to dive into the nitty gritty here, there's an interesting conversation, which is, the reality is when a new TFT set ships, that's when we likely get our, biggest influx of players who are like excited to play the set. I think if you want a like known example of this, Disguised Toast, right? Like, he's somebody who will usually show up nowadays for a new set, support the box boot camp, and then afterwards, maybe bounce, maybe not. But that day, that patch 1 meta is so insanely important to making sure that people have a good impression of the set. Things are really, really positive. And so one of our biggest challenges has always been, how do we get the meta for a day 1 launch to be really, really good? And that's where we should probably be spending a lot of our resources. Now, once you launch that day one, let's say it's good or mediocre or bad or whatever, further changes actually have relatively low value to our KPIs. And that's actually been something where I've been reprimanded is a strong word, but certainly looked down on for spending a lot of my time in the past of like, well, I want to make it as good as it can be even after post-launch. But the reality is that's not really affecting our KPIs, and someone at my level, the senior director level or whatever, should be doing things that are much, much more impactful. And so that's actually been one of, I think, the challenges of moving up, if you will. So, but I mean, this will be the good opportunity for that. And yeah, so, but yeah, as I mentioned, today I'm going to be doing, today I'm going to be flying. It's just morning will be a couple quick meetings and then pack up, head to the airport, fly out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, offsite, Friday, fly back home, couple meetings, and that'll be my week. So for me, it's a pretty like uneventful week of things I can share about because again, the next 3 of these are going to be sitting in a hotel room, maybe 4. But yeah, but the team I know will be working on the patch. They had local lock already last Friday because you got to go fast. I know they're working on a couple key things. One of the other ones I wanted to talk about really briefly, there was a moment on stream. Actually, there were a couple moments on stream, let me tell you. The highlight one, by the way, the highlight silly moment on stream, someone came into my stream and said, wow, Mort, you got a nice haircut. Do you have to go to court or something? Actually, I don't think they said or something. They said, you have to go to court. And it was the most I could not comprehend the logic of yes, did you know that people who get haircuts go to court? And my brain broke. That was one of those. Plus, I was 8 losses deep at that point, so that one broke my brain. Yeah, there was that moment. But oh God, where was I going with this? There was something about the meta. I can't remember now. Damn it. It's Monday morning. But oh no, now I remember. Okay. I had this moment on stream where someone came in was asking about why don't I tailor my power-ups, which for anyone who may not know, there is this system right now where power-ups you can't roll the same power-up in the next power-up regardless of champion. So what people are doing is, if you want something like all-out Cassante, you want the highest possible odds for it to show up. So you use the power-up on 2 other attack tanks to make all the generic options not be able to show up. And then you use it on Cassante, which slightly increases the odds of it showing up. And someone asked me about this, and I said, because that level of micro optimization isn't worth it. And I got a little snappy and I said, most of you who are spending time trying to do that, that's not where you should be spending your time. And, I'm like, because you'll barely get out of silver. And the person was like, optimal equals silver, ? And so here's my thing. First off, there are, I've always ranted about people can barely build a board, or people are incapable of, knowing the fundamentals. Most players, and I say most being 99%, if you're higher than masters, you can ignore this. But most people will look for optimizations in the wrong places. And this is the kind of thing that if you're sitting in platinum or emerald or diamond, you should be improving your fundamentals, not worrying about this kind of thing. And secondly, and here's the dirty thing, if anyone looks at this situation and thinks, yes, we should definitely spend our time learning this because the devs are going to keep it in the game, what's wrong with you? Who looks at that and goes, yeah, that's definitely the system they're going to keep for 3.5 months. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that is going to be gone next patch. I know the second we realized it, there were definitely some eye rolls and some oopsies. But I'm pretty sure next patch that will be gone. So, and it's one of those things that, again, like, you try to do something nice for players to remove some of the bad luck options, but it becomes a hidden rule that can become abused. And like we've talked about before, if it's a hidden rule players can optimize around, it's not a very good hidden rule. So, yeah. So, what did I see? Yesterday somebody had made a website that shows you how to optimize the Powerup picking manipulation. And it was like, okay, well, again, that website is going to be dead in a week and a half, or I guess a week. So, yeah, stuff like that is like, again, if that's where you're going to spend your energy, you're going to regret it later. And so I would rather most players, and again, most being anyone below masters, spend their time learning the fundamentals of the game so they can be better set to set and not go, oops, I lost my little edge and now I can't win games because I don't know how to trick into a certain one. Now, all of that being said, the other problem here is, of course, that if it is ever optimal to seek out one particular power-up, we've probably screwed up in different ways. But that's a whole other conversation, right? And all-out Cassante being currently the most extreme example of this. So, yeah. I think, in fact, every Cassante I saw on Sunday that didn't have all-out, you could tell was somebody trying to play all-out and just low-rolling. So, it was pretty funny. But, anyway, that's kind of my general thoughts on how things went. I did play 2 more games afterwards, because after the stream I went and spent time with my wife, since I'm going to be gone. And then when I got home, I had a little bit of time left, sorted some magic cards, and played 2 games of TFT, and I went 4th in both of them. One was the Ludens game. One was, I played Duelist Reroll with like Kaisa and Viego and stuff, and Duelist Reroll late game just kind of gets ran over. And in fact, I think that's one of the other things with the meta right now is a lot of the top comps are who can just explode the other team fast enough. Whether it be the 6 Sorks with Gwen, or, you know, even Duelist can, at its best, can run things over. Crystal Gambit, once you get that going, that's pretty insane. All-out Cassante deleting backlines very quickly. You know, there's a lot of high DPS comps, which is why Ginsu's is not really good right now in this meta. So, anyway, like I said, there's some general thoughts, but at the end of the day, I don't have any impact right now, which is a whole other thing. So, yeah. All right, I did actually bring some questions today, and there was a really good one I kind of wanted to start with. Someone asked a really interesting question, which is, how do you approach the fact that games with variance can be addicting? You know, it's inherently true that games of chance create the sensation of like, I want to try it again. And we see this in many, many things, that those create addiction. Now, again, everything I'm about to say, I preface with, this is my personal opinion, and I am not a psychologist or an expert on this matter. I'm just a guy who makes fun games. One of the things I have not really been a fan of over the years is how people will use the term addiction to vilify basically anything. And it's true, because if you look at like a lot of what humans do, everything can be addicting, right? Like if you really do your research and look into this, there are people who get addicted to going to the gym. right? And like the people who, I've seen gym bros who is just like going to the gym is something they do to the point where like they're skipping work to go to the gym and things like that. Eating can be addicting as hell. And not just unhealthy foods, but like eating in general can be very, very addicting. And we'll use that to vilify everyone who makes food. Video games can be addicting. Gambling is addicting, right? Like all of these things are addicting. And it is true to some extent, and that's why it's such a hard conversation to have, because there is an element of truth in the sense that anything that brings you positive dopamine can be addicting, right? Sex can be addicting. Everything can be addicting because the feeling that you get when doing something that you enjoy is a positive one, and that feeling is addictive. It's addictive to be happy. Isn't that crazy? It's addictive to be happy. So that's kind of my high level approach, in the sense that like, look, at the end of the day, if everything is addicting, there has to be some level of personal responsibility to what you offer people. There has to be some level of, I am providing something that's fun and interesting, that gives you dopamine through whatever it does, right? Whether it be I make a delicious meal, or, my wife bakes me some delicious treats. She makes me cupcakes. I don't want to get addicted to her cupcakes. Or, I make a game that has variance. And in TFT's case, because the game has variance, there are a high number of permutations, and every game feels different, and the variance is fun, to the point where it provides you with something a lot of other games don't, which is almost infinite replayability. Tack that on with the sets we do every year, and it's like you can get that new feeling sensation more than most other video games. Is that a bad thing? Should I be looking at that and going, yeah, but someone might enjoy it too much, so we shouldn't make this because it'll be enjoyable? That's ludicrous, right? But again, it's tough because there's obviously levels, and this is where the hard part comes in, is intent, right? And you can't prove intent, you can't discuss intent, right? All I can tell you, and you don't have to trust me, is at the end of the day, I just want to make a fun video game. I don't want to like trick people into playing it every day. And in fact, I've been very clear that like, hey, if you're not having fun, stop playing, go play something else. I actually don't think it's healthy when people play TFT for 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Like, that's not healthy. I just want to make a fun video game. But I also understand, and remember I've talked about how I'm a little naive sometimes. I understand that not everyone's like that, right? Like, there are definitely, I've seen it, there are games in the industry that talk about things in terms of, how do we keep our players' retention high? How do we adjust things so that players are more likely to spend money, right? Like, there are absolutely companies out there that do that. I am happy to tell you that I'm not one of them, but I also, I just said that, and someone's going to be like, yeah, but you do chibis with gacha, right? And I've explained why we do that before. I understand the vilification of this here. But again, I'm also telling you that, like, I do so with no ill intention, and it's one of the reasons why, like, TFT will always be free to play. I swear to God, if they ever, if the main PvP game of TFT ever had pay for power, I would retry. I'm out, But I'm not everyone, right? Like, so there are people out there that are out there to manipulate and use that addictiveness for money, right? Like the alcohol industry, right? Or, there's that South Park episode where they were talking about mobile games and how they actually study the addictive personality and use notifications, and things like that. And it's like I said, thankfully, I've never been a part of that, but I know it exists. And so it is right when people are like, they get mad at the games industry because there is something. And I've kind of got off topic here of like all addictiveness and all personal manipulation, which wasn't your original question. Your original question was about how variance accelerates that. And again, to me, variance accelerates that by creating different experiences. And different experiences are what dopamine, like, it's why everyone wants a new video game. Because a new video game is a new experience, and a new experience creates more dopamine. And if you play the same game over and over, that goes away, right? Unless you're a speedrunner, in which case something is wrong with your dopamine receptors, and the only dopamine receptor is showing how you can go faster. That's just a joke, by the way. I'm just teasing speedrunners. So, I don't know. Like I said, your question was, how do I approach it? I approach it at the end of the day with, I just want to make a fun video game that is fun to play. I hope that people can self-manage themselves, and I would hate for people to irresponsibly like skip work or skip school to play TFT. That's definitely not what I want. Just like I didn't want, I'm sure the creators of WoW didn't want that. But just because you make something good and someone chooses to abuse it does not mean the person who made the good thing is the villain, in my opinion. Assuming their intentions are pure. And that's, again, I know the hard line here. And of course, the other part that's tricky here is that if you try to make money of any kind, there is certain internet culture that will vilify you, right? It's like, so, I don't know. It's one of those complicated topics that Twitter personalities especially will try to tear into you, but I'm repeating myself here, so this is the last time I'll say it. But at the end of the day, I just try to make a fun game. Variance adds to replayability, which keeps the game fun, which is a good thing in my opinion. So is making new content, which is why we do it. And I'm going to keep making the game fun and polishing the game and making it better. And whatever video games I work on, that will always be true. So, do I sound like a weird ad that's play games responsibly? Yeah, maybe. By the way, sun's coming out. I can see you guys now. Hello. I'm not just walking in the dark. So, there you go. All right, next question. Is there a reason behind the baseline items that we use? The sword, the belt, and why did we not use like ruby crystal for League as opposed to belt? So this isn't going to be a long answer, but the short version is it made sense for items to be built out of components. Brad's original design, which was very elegant, was just because if you compared it to Dota Auto Chess had all these weird recipes that followed no rhyme or reason. Some items were just a single upgrade path. Some items required 3 of an item. Some items required 2, then 2. It was like, it made no sense. And so Brad came up with a great system. It was very intuitive, which was just every item is made from component A plus component B, and every combination of component A and component B makes an item. Nice, simple, elegant, easy to understand. And like, yes, there's a lot of depth to it because there's a lot of combinations, but at the end of the day, everyone can make an item. Whereas again, Dota Auto Chess was like, wait, I can't upgrade this item because I don't have this other component, but I don't know how to get that other component. And you can see even Underlords changed it to a point where they just started like letting you pick your items. So in that world, the components were meant to be something simple and digestible. And we always approach the game from not just League players, but anyone could enjoy the game. And so the components being physical objects that were easy to represent, like pieces of armor, made much more sense than like ruby crystal, which is very abstract. It's very sort of mystical and magical, right? And so if you name off the components, it's sort of like, well, you have a sword, and although I say that out loud, I'm like, well, Tyr is kind of tricky, but I think Tyr was the one that at least it wasn't the blue crystal. It was more like, this is monogen. But could it have worked as the blue gem? Probably. I think that could have totally been fine. It does feel weird to like combine a gem and a belt into armor, but not that weird, you know? I think that was sort of the reason. It was like, well, I have all these different components. And in Brad's case, I think he was looking at like all the components as components. So, and so like someone also asked, like, why not dagger instead of bow? Well, dagger and sword are pretty damn similar. And that's a good way to get a player confused, right? It's like, which sharp, pointy object? But sword and bow are very different, right? And so like that one actually is a very clear, you definitely do that. Or that's actually a reason not to use red and blue crystal at the very least, because then you just have two crystals, which leads to confusion, right? But if I say belt and cloak and armor and sword and bow, those are all very distinct, so they stand out, and I think that's why they were chosen. Now again, could Tyr have been blue crystal? Sure, it absolutely could have. I think that's the one you could nitpick and be like, well, why isn't it the other way? It could have been. It could have been at the end of the day, and it wouldn't have caused any harm. But I think Tyr works just as well. So, yeah. So I think just having clear, distinct, unique components made for the most visually distinct and clear itemization for that system that Brad made. So there you go. All right, I might have time for one more here. Let's see. Oh, I'll try to do this one. Why I said on one of my previous walks that Star Guardian is one of the hardest traits to balance. Why is that true, especially compared to something like Guild or Heavenly, which we've done before? Why is this one that much harder? Okay, so if I tell you I'm going to give you 10 AD, okay, that increases your damage output 10% on the physical axes. Great. If I want to give you a similar amount of attack speed, that's very similar, right? How do I want to increase your damage by 10%? Well, I'll probably give you about 10% attack speed. Now it might be 11. Now it might be 9. But the point at the end of the day is our base stats are all relatively comparable to each other. They're all multiplicative with each other, you know, and you have to make the decision of like, well, I already have attack speed. I don't need attack speed as much. I'd rather have AD. But at the end of the day, they're all very comparable. And so balancing base stats with each other are really easy, actually. We have so many frameworks in place for that. And because Heavenly affects your entire team, it's a nice smooth curve of just like your whole team gains 10 AD, now your whole team gains 10 AD and 10 attack speed, or 11 AD and 11 attack speed, right? Like all of these things are numeric, simple, and easy to understand. Star Guardian's a lot trickier because, first off, the outputs themselves are non-stats, right? Some of them are still stats, right? Like, getting a shield at the start of combat really that different than health? Not really. You know, Rel's is pretty easy to balance. But what about Zaya's? Zaya's is like magic damage on attack, which can sound like AD, but it's not. It's a little different. Oh, by the way, and it scales as the game goes on. So that's tricky. You have Syndra, who gives AP, but AP over time, which means you have to deal with the fact that Syndra is better in the early game, but worse in the late game. Then you have Poppy, who gives you % health back. How does that compare to Rel Shield? You know. Now, to top all of this off, you have all of these different attributes that are different, right? Like, I'll point out one that I think is just way off, for example. Nico increases your healing and shielding by 10%. Okay, so she does nothing unless you heal or shield. Meanwhile, Poppy says they all gain 40% of their health back when they get low. Huh? Those seem not very relative to each other. Okay. Is that a bad thing? Should you be rewarded for hitting the forecast? Or are they way far off, right? Like, that seems off. Now, in addition, because it doesn't affect your whole team, you have this weird question of like, is it optimal to cut? Let's say, for example, you believed that Nico was underpowered. Should you cut Nico from your Star Guardian comp? Because if she's not worth it, that's all she's providing to the trait is this extra healing and shielding, you would just cut her. And so all of a sudden, players would find out in a guide that like the optimal way to play Star Guardian is to play 6 Star Guardian. Don't play Xayah and Nico because their bonuses don't do shit for you and they're bad, right? But we also have the axes where it scales them up. Right now, if you currently, like, I know on PBE it got nerfed like 3 times, but if you play, 6 versus 7 Star Guardian, all the bonuses are increased by like, I think it goes from like 160% to 170% or something like that. So it's not just Nico adds the shielding healing, but she also adds an extra 10% to every other bonus. So that has to be taken into account. And so if you get those numbers wrong, you end up with the world where I think we're at right now, which is Star Guardian is incredibly weak unless you have 8 or 9 or 10. And that's not to mention the emblem, which also increases everything by large amounts. And so it's like, oh, well, Poppy's healing at 40% might actually be quite balanced. But once you get it up with 9 Star Guardian and the emblem, and it's now 70%, might be ridiculously OP. So now all of a sudden you have to like change the multipliers on the trait as well. And so it's a trait with so many levers and so many unique outputs that are hard to quantify with each other, right? I bet you the fact I just said like 10% shielding and healing is weak. Some of you might have went like, is it? That sounds really good. I don't know. Is that actually weak? And especially because, by the way, that 10% shielding and healing affects the Poppy one. So when your Poppy is healing, she's healing for more, right? So it's like, now you have to take that into account. And so, like I said, if you do it wrong, there's a world where it's like, no, you only play 4 Star Guardian. But if you do it wrong the other way, you have what we have right now, I believe, which is you only ever play vertical Star Guardian, and anything short of, 8 Star Guardian is basically unplayable, right? And finding that middle ground where it's like actually a really flexible trait is the dream. But my God, that's going to be hard. My God. That is one that, like, if I were balancing, I would be dreading that task because that is a lot of math, a lot of simming, and a lot of like really understanding what each of those outputs do, which is scary. So, and that's assuming even they're all the right outputs, right? Like maybe you find out that like Rel's shield being flat just makes her always inconsequentially bad, So it's like you have to change it to percent, but if you change it to percent, it's just Poppy, So it's stuff like that. That's what makes it pretty hard to balance. So, okay, I'm at 33 minutes. I got to wrap this up. The sun's coming out. I can see you guys. It's good. I'm going to go shower, get dressed, pack up, and head to the airport. So I will see you guys from a different location tomorrow. Hopefully you have a great week. Good luck with your climbs. If you have any good games, send them my way. I'm always looking for the unconventional stuff that's succeeding. Don't send me all out Cassantes, or I'll go all out on you. So, all right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.